Grandpa Thorne never expected a quiet Sunday afternoon to turn into a showdown that would echo through his entire neighborhood. But when that bloated, self-righteous HOA president, Mrs. Penelope Karen Bradford, stomped across his freshly poured concrete ramp with her designer stilettos, cackling about illegal modifications, he realized she'd finally gone too far. She'd always had it in for him. Her favorite Sunday pastime was rattling off bogus fines to anyone who dared defy her precious bylaws. But this time she'd targeted his new ADA-compliant ramp, installed for his arthritic knees and failing hips. Her grotesque shadow fell across the smooth surface as she planted her clipboard and began ticking boxes with exaggerated fervor, her double chin quivering in self-satisfaction. Grandpa's blood boiled at the sight of her marking down violation. Unapproved construction in big, red ink while a cluster of onlookers whispered nervously. With deliberate calm he retrieved a battered leather satchel from his truck, then withdrew the thick ADA handbook dog-eared from years of courtroom battles defending accessibility, and slipped it beneath its clear plastic cover. Karen hadn't noticed. She was too busy preening and flapping her clipboard like a trophy. In a single fluid motion, Grandpa strode forward, his worn work boots thumping on freshly set concrete. Before she could react, he rammed a copy of that sacred manual against the windshield of her cherry-red Mercedes convertible. The glass sang with a crack as the corner of the handbook pressed imprint deep onto the driver's side. Mrs. Bradford yelped as her carefully coiffed hairdo shuddered from the shock. The onlookers gasped, some clutching their phones, ready to memorialize the moment. In the stunned silence that followed, Grandpa simply tipped his weathered cap and said, "If you're going to enforce the rules, you should know them." Then he pivoted on his heel and walked back toward his porch, leaving a perfect, indelible handprint across her windshield and a chorus of whispers swelling behind him. At first, Karen's outrage was thunderous. She stomped over, fingernails digging into the leather seats, eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you vandalize my property? This is assault, trespassing, and you'll pay for this," she screeched while flipping open her phone. But as she peered through the cracked glass at the bold imprint reading Section 4.3 Access for All, her eyes narrowed in confusion. An awkward murmur rippled through the crowd. "Wasn't that the handbook you're supposed to enforce?" someone whispered. Her jaw clenched as she realized the damage wasn't to the expensive car, but to her credibility. The next morning, Grandpa awoke to the distant roar of cameras and neighbors scattering across his lawn. He peered out the window to see a gaggle of local reporters huddled behind Karen's battered convertible, microphones thrust like spears. On national blogs, video clips were already trending. A chubby HOA tyrant reduced to sputtering indignation by a stooped veteran wielding nothing but a law book. Somewhere in the fray, his grandson Tyler burst through the crowd carrying a homemade sign that read, "Know your rights, Mrs. Bradford," a cheeky twist that sent even more laughter into the air. Behind them, the wooden sign Tyler had made swung on a post, ADA Handbook on her windshield. With that quiet, effective gesture, Grandpa Thorne had exposed Karen's hypocrisy to everyone within earshot. The following week, the HOA convened an emergency meeting to address the viral controversy. Karen arrived in a tailored suit, flanked by her loyal clique, determined to rewrite the narrative by drafting a fresh round of punitive fines. But when she tried to speak, the room fell silent as Grandpa wheeled in his ramp and the handbook itself, placing both on display at the front table. "You've cited me here, and now you've cited yourselves," he announced in a voice roughened by age but steely with righteousness. His grandson Tyler pulled out his phone and streamed the entire encounter live, every viewer witnessing the tableau. An elderly man challenging an entrenched bully with nothing but truth and tenacity. Midway through Karen's pompous bluster, the biggest twist of all emerged as a board member, Linda Choi, a formerly silent ally of Karen, stepped forward and dropped her binder onto the table. With a trembling gesture, she confessed that she'd grown weary of Karen's illegal edicts and secret deals with local contractors who padded HOA fees. Linda revealed emails proving Karen had pocketed kickbacks in exchange for approving unauthorized landscaping projects, proof Karen had hoped to keep hidden by silencing any dissent with an avalanche of phony violations. The room buzzed with shock as Linda's testimony dismantled Karen's reign in real time, leaving her scrambling for the next clause to defend herself. But the airtight evidence made every excuse crumble like dry plaster. Karen's face turned the color of rusted metal, her hands shaking as the board chairman called for her immediate suspension pending a full audit and legal review. The spectators erupted in applause, not for Grandpa's physical stunt that had ignited the firestorm, but for the justice that followed, justice born from a law book and an unshakable belief that rules exist to protect, not oppress. In the aftermath, local news outlets hailed Grandpa Thorne as a community hero who reminded everyone that accessibility is a right, not a suggestion. The HOA's executive committee disbanded, replaced by a diverse council committed to transparency and respect. Tyler shared clips of the day his grandfather became the unlikely David to Karen's Goliath, inspiring comments from across the country. More power to him. This is how you stand up to bullies, and accessibility wins. Even the county commissioner reached out personally to congratulate Grandpa and announce plans to champion new ordinances ensuring universal design in all public and private developments. As for Mrs. Bradford, she retreated into ignominy, her Mercedes windshield forever bearing the fingerprint of her downfall. She moved away before taxes came due on her ill-gotten gains, her social media accounts deleted, her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. Standing on his porch with a fresh cup of coffee, Grandpa watched the wooden sign sway gently in the breeze, its simple message still clear to anyone who passed by. ADA Handbook on her windshield. He tipped his hat to the sun and whispered, "Never underestimate an old man with a cause." Then he turned inside to bake a pie, ready for the next peaceful Sunday for now, at least. If you believe justice was served, share your thoughts. Right or wrong? Grandpa Thorne's victory that breezy afternoon felt like the culmination of a lifetime of small but meaningful battles. Yet in the days that followed, the ripple effects sheltered unexpected storms and triumphs alike. Local news crews descended on his porch, cameras peering through the latticework as they peppered him with questions, but he deflected most with a disarming chuckle and a simple, "I just did what was right." Behind his stoic smile, though, he wrestled with the surreal reality of his newfound notoriety, sleeping late for the first time in decades before the morning light coaxed him awake. As Tyler set out empty coffee cups from the kitchen, he teased, "Grandpa, don't get a big head now. Next thing we know, you'll be signing autographs." Grandpa rumbled a laugh and tousled his grandson's hair, appreciating the boy's blend of mischief and loyalty. The community, once intimidated by Karen's iron-fisted rule, now felt emboldened to speak out. Neighbors edged onto their lawns at odd hours, sharing whispered grievances about past fines and petty harassments. An impromptu coalition formed, spearheaded by Linda Choi, who invited Grandpa to co-host weekly gatherings under the old oak tree by the community garden. Here, residents of all ages and backgrounds convened to draft a list of proposed bylaws rooted in fairness, transparency, and crucially accessibility. Local attorneys volunteered pro bono on weekends to review the draft, while a coalition of disability rights advocates offered guidance on universal design principles. Grandpa sat at the heart of these sessions, his battered copy of the ADA Handbook open on his lap like a sacred text. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did, his words carried the heft of lived experience and unshakable conviction. As summer warmed the evenings, the coalition hosted barbecues where laughter replaced the tension that once clung to every gathering. Tyler strung lanterns along the garden fence, while neighborly potluck dishes clustered like vibrant mosaics on picnic tables. Even skeptical stragglers who had once feared Karen's wrath mingled with newfound ease. One evening, as Grandpa glided his wheelchair toward a cluster of families sharing watermelon slices, he felt a surge of pride at the way fear had transmuted into camaraderie. Behind him, a wooden sign copied from Tyler's original prototype bore the message, "Community built on respect." It swayed gently in the trellis breeze, a quiet testament to the change sparked by a cracked windshield and a law book. Yet not everyone celebrated the revolution. Rumors swirled that Karen's allies, humiliated and displaced, mulled legal actions to reclaim power. Flyers appeared on mailboxes accusing Grandpa of negligence claims that his ramp endangered passersby. Anonymous op-eds disparaged the coalition as a radical clique, labeling the ADA Handbook stunt a reckless public nuisance. Thorne paid little heed to the whispers, but he recognized that progress often provokes backlash. So when a lawyer's letter arrived alleging defamation and property damage, he invited the complainants to meet face-to-face, rather than retreating into silence. The counter-meeting occurred in the town hall's council chamber, where the coalition presented meticulous documentation, video timestamps, witness testimonies, and the original HOA contracts proving Karen's misdeeds. Scholars from the nearby university's law school offered expert testimony on the importance of affirmative accessibility measures, citing studies that showed ramps and entry aids improved neighborhood safety for aging residents and young families alike. When one of Karen's erstwhile supporters challenged the fairness of replacing one bully with another, Grandpa leaned forward, voice steady, and offered an olive branch. "Our aim isn't to punish individuals, it's to safeguard our shared humanity." Silence followed, heavy but reflective, as the deep moral undercurrent of his words settled over the room. One by one, the dissenters recanted or fell mute, and by sunset, the threat of litigation faded into absurdity. With the tension diffused, the coalition celebrated a symbolic milestone. The town council unanimously approved the new bylaws, embedding universal design and transparent governance into the community's charter. On signing day, children scattered confetti from second-story balconies while volunteers in matching green shirts unveiled a commemorative plaque at the ramp's base honoring all who believe in access for all. Grandpa smiled and shook hands with old rivals who now donned the same shirt. Later, at the celebratory luncheon, he rose to speak. His voice trembled only slightly as he recounted how fear can be the greatest barrier, and courage the most potent key. He dedicated the bylaws to every person who'd ever felt unwelcome on their own doorstep, and urged them to never overlook the power of small actions to topple the mightiest injustices. Laughter and applause washed over him, mingling with tears of relief and triumph. Beyond the ramp and the bylaws, Grandpa Thorne's example sparked a broader conversation across the county. The local paper ran a front-page feature quoting him as saying, "Change begins when you park the right book on the right window." That line, as unpretentious as the man himself, captured imaginations far beyond his cul-de-sac. Disability advocates from neighboring towns reached out to share their own stories and glean strategies for grassroots activism. The county commissioner, emboldened by public support, proposed a regional accessibility task force that modeled itself on Grandpa's coalition. Invitations arrived for him to speak at civic forums in nearby cities, and Tyler helped manage the flurry of emails, filtering out spam from genuine interest. Though flattered, Grandpa demurred on most invites, preferring the steady rhythm of his porch routine and the smell of fresh pies cooling on the windowsill. One late afternoon, as he polished his woodworking tools for a new bench project, Tyler asked, "Would you ever think about writing your memoir?" Grandpa paused, saw in his grandson's eager eyes a reflection of youthful possibility, and tapped the thick stack of ADA pages at his side. "Maybe one day," he said with a wink. "But for now, I've got stories to keep making." Meanwhile, Karen Bradford's fate remained a cautionary tale. News outlets tracked her departure to a distant town, where she attempted to reintegrate under a new HOA with lofty promises of reform. Predictably, her same-old tactics provoked unrest, and she faced quiet censure from a skeptical board. The Mercedes she once cherished sold at auction, windshield engraving and all, fetching a fraction of its former worth. Throughout it all, Grandpa heard occasional murmurs about her regrettable reputation, but he chose compassion over vindictiveness, recalling that fear often begets cruelty. In a rare gesture, he mailed her a clean copy of the ADA Handbook, scribbled with a note, "It's never too late to read the right page." No reply came, but he hoped in his own quiet way that even Karen could learn what he had. That true authority arises from understanding and empathy, not from wielding power over others. As autumn approached, the neighborhood braced for cooler winds and harvest gatherings. The ramp remained a hub of activity. Strollers, wheelchairs, bikes, and walkers glided over its gentle incline like dancers in a boulevard ballet. The wooden sign stood on, its message fresh despite sun and rain. On Halloween night, Tyler and his friends hung paper pumpkins from the porch while Grandpa offered candy to trick-or-treaters, each greeting him with adoration born of his status as local legend. He passed out treats with a grin and a pat on the shoulder, insisting every child take an extra piece for the person back at home. Later, after the last costume duo scampered off, he and Tyler collected stray candy wrappers and reminisced about the journey from confrontation to celebration. Tyler draped an arm around his grandfather's shoulders and said, "You changed the whole game, you know." Grandpa chuckled and looked up at the strings of jack-o'-lantern lights. "I just parked the right book on the right windshield," he replied, then nudged Tyler gently. "But it's people like you who carry it forward." The next day, news broke that the county had formally named the community garden walkway Thorn's Passage and commissioned a modest plaque depicting a book resting on a car windshield. When Grandpa visited the site, he found neighbors arranging a bench in his honor, engraved with his initials and the phrase, "Stand up for what's right." He pressed a hand to the cool metal, overwhelmed by a lifetime of unintended footprints, and now this deliberate tribute. In a moment of reverent silence, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Beneath the oak tree, the coalition continued its work, drafting initiatives to support local seniors, veterans, and families with disabilities, endeavors that extended far beyond ADA ramps. He often joined them, not as leader but as elder statesman, guiding with gentle suggestions and turning the pages of policy documents as if each line bore the weight of collective dreams. His legacy, born from a simple act of defiance, would endure in every barrier removed, every voice emboldened, and every neighbor who now knew they held the power to shape their world. And though the cracked windshield and the scarred stigma of Karen Bradford's worst impulses faded in the rearview mirror of history, the imprint of justice remained indelible on the heart of the community. As the leaves turned golden and the first chill of winter crept in, Grandpa Thorne sat on his porch, wrapped in a thick knit blanket, watching the day fade. He took a slow breath of crisp air, content that his small stand for equality had blossomed into a movement rooted in respect. With a final glance at the ADA Handbook resting beside his rocker, he murmured, "Every story needs its champion." Then, as twilight deepened, he closed his eyes and drifted into a peaceful slumber, knowing that tomorrow people would roll, walk, and glide across